Namo Buddhaya. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Buddhaya. Okay, friends, I'd like to kind of continue on where I left off this morning, talking about the process of impermanence, because that's one of the underlying cornerstone teachings of the Dhamma of the Buddha about impermanence and also about no self, the understanding of reality. And this topic is the five aggregates. So the five aggregates is the main focus of insight meditation or vipassana meditation, taught by the Buddha. And five aggregates of clinging, they're called the aggregates of clinging, because we cling or identify with these things as being I, me, and mine, and myself. And that's the clinging to them is what leads to delusions and also all the desires, aversions, greed, hatred, and delusion, and the whole process of accumulating karma. So actually, that's what life is the five aggregates. So it's a little bit complicated to understand, but I'll try to explain it in a way that hopefully you could understand, because that's really what we focus on in our meditation, whether we call it that or not. So, how many people have heard about those five aggregates? Just raise your hand. Oh, some people have. No. Okay. So basically, the material form, the aggregate of material form, basically we regard it as being, it's our physical body. But it's not only the physical body, it's all physical matter in the world. So even all animals, even this meditation hall, it's comprised of at least the material aggregate. And basically the material aggregate is just, as I mentioned before, electrons, atoms, molecules, and cells. And many thousands or millions of cells are what make up eyeballs and fingernails and hair and every other type of material matter. Even this universe. And anybody who's studied physics can understand how all these atoms are in constant state of dynamic change and flux. So that's really what our body is on the microscopic level. And sounds belong to material form, but it's the sound vibration. In other words, you're hearing this sound now, right? But if you close your eyes and then you hear this sound, what comes into your mind? Yeah. Who's making that sound? Hmm? You identify that sound as being Bhante talking or something. But that's a perception. We'll get into that in a minute. So all material forms, sound vibrations, visible vibrations, even when you're looking at this, what's striking your eye is color and form in certain shapes and patterns. And that, as opposed in any other object, you look at this, you look at any object, they all have a different shape and texture. That's its material form. And this is what, and these are constantly changing. So the material form is anything we experience through our senses. You feel the body sitting, you feel the buttocks pressing the seat. That material vibration is what I call the earth vibration. So these 4 elements of earth, fire, water, and air are how electrons, atoms, molecules manifest either as being something hard, like you can grab your arm and squeeze, so it's kind of hard, you feel it. So that's called the earth vibration. The clothing touching your skin is the earth vibration, as opposed to the water vibration, the water element. So if you have a tear, you have saliva in your mouth, you have urine, you have blood, anything that's of a watery nature, that's called the water vibration. And so there's lots of water in the body. And external too, the rays, the water element. And then there's the heat element. It's any ranges of temperature. So in this body, this body has a temperature of about 98 degrees, the human body. But it can go get a fever and go a little higher, right? If it goes too high, you'll die. And if it goes too low, you'll also die. And so the heat element is in our body. It's also in the external world. The sun warms the sun goes behind the clouds, it gets cold. So this constant fluctuation of heat and cold is that heat vibration. And that is going on in our body too. Digest food, you get a fever, and so on, or you get chilly. And then there's the air vibration or movement vibration. So when you feel the breathing, that air is going in and out of the body, or wind blowing. Or we also have other types of air inside the body, body cavities. You make a certain noise, and here comes out here, here comes out here, and so on. But anyway, so those 4 elements make up this body. But when they're all together, But so again, essentially, they're just vibrations. But they're experienced as objects. Our mind experiences them as objects. And we get attached to the object. I don't want to make it too complicated. And then there's the feeling. All these vibrations create a feeling or a sensation. A pleasant sensation, neutral sensation, or painful sensation. Now, we've been talking about painful and pleasant sensations quite a lot, right? So that's one of the aggregates, the second aggregate of sensation. And all of these material vibrations trigger off one of these kind of sensations, either a painful feeling, pleasant feeling, or neutral feeling. Now, the neutral feelings you don't really react to very much. Kind of like the clothing touching your skin. It's kind of a neutral feeling. It's not necessarily pleasant. It's not necessarily painful, or so many other things are neutral. Majority of the feelings that we have are neutral feelings that kind of go unnoticed, or you don't react to. But the ones we react to are the pleasant ones. We react to the pleasant sensations with attachment. Oh, I like that. And painful feelings we react to with aversion. I want to get away from that. Now, how many people in your meditations this morning experienced some painful sensations? And how many people also experience pleasant sensations? Now, for a lot of people, painful sensations may outweigh pleasant sensations in certain situations, or in other situations it might change. And those can be a physical sensation or a mental pleasant sensation. I mean, the physical one actually doesn't have a pleasant or painful quality to it, but it's how the mind interprets through past experience. So the baby, for example, when he grabbed the cat's tail and got scratched, gave him a painful feeling. And then every time he saw a black cat again, or cat, the idea of getting a painful feeling automatically came to the mind. And the same with so many other objects. So it's a mentally created reaction. It's a habit. And then, so we have desire and greed for pleasurable feelings, and aversion and hatred and fear against getting painful feelings. We've already discussed this several times. The whole mind goes back and forth between those two dualities, basically from birth until death. So, but we cling to them as being real, when actually they're just vibrations. And they're conditioned. That's the main thing. These feelings can change. Because what you might have once experienced as a painful sensation, as you grow up or change or with training, you can, that might turn into a pleasant one, and vice versa. What may have given you a pleasant sensation may give you a painful sensation later. Like with relationships, especially. Right? A certain person might have caused a pleasant feeling in you when they're stroking your ego, or pushing all the right buttons and so on. But that changes. The same person might then create a painful feeling in you. Anybody ever had that happen? Maybe not in this group. Okay. So that's important to understand, this nature of feelings, that we cling to them, but actually they can be changed. But they cause us a lot of suffering by clinging. Yes, that brings pleasure to me. I want that. Or I don't want that. And so people will break precepts over kill, lie, cheat, steal, all in the name of this clinging to these pleasurable sensations and painful. Now it gets interesting. The third aggregate is perception. Now, perception is what we actually see, with our eyes. So you're looking up here, and because you've seen this image before, you recognize it as being so-and-so, Bhante Rahula. Now, if you never had seen my picture before, or anything else, and you saw me in a crowd, you wouldn't recognize me. So the perception is the way the mind perceives or creates an object out of just vibration. And also more clearly with sound. You're sitting there meditating and you hear these different sounds. But you don't hear sounds, you hear somebody nailing, or you hear somebody walking, or you hear a door slam. Is it? I don't know. When you hear those sounds, come on, you've heard them 1,000 times already today. So anyway, it's the mental picture or recognition of a vibration, basically, of the feeling, which is just a vibration. You recognize it. And then that perception has the quality of the feeling to it. If it produced a painful feeling, then when you see that object, it will be associated with something that you don't like, or that you like. And then we take these objects then to have a value of something beautiful, ugly, I like it, I don't like it, and a desire to get that object again or to get away from it. But it's really the feeling the object is producing, not the object itself. Now, this is very, very interesting to understand. We think it's the objects that we want in life, but it's actually the feeling that the object gives off that we want. Let's go back to the example of the relationships, right? So a certain person, is attractive to you for whatever reasons, because it produces a pleasant feeling in the person. It could be anything else, food, music. But when that changes, that object is not producing a pleasant feeling in you anymore, producing a painful feeling, then you don't like it anymore. So that's why this is a very essential transition point between feeling and perception. That it's really the feeling we want, not the objects of the world. You want a beautiful house, you want a nice car to show off to others, to give you a pleasant feeling. But again, when those things stop producing that, then you change, and then you want something else. But we really cling to these ideas and these objects as being the source of our happiness when they're subject to change very easily. And then once you recognize an object, then you react to it. That means you go after it to want it, to hold it, or to get away from it. So that's called the habit reaction, or the sankhara, the reaction to the perception. And that's where you create karma. So if you try to hold on to that object or go after it, whatever actions you do, that's the sort of the karmic result. And once you've done the karmic action, the sankhara, it becomes ingrained in the nervous system, and it becomes a habit. So every time you react in the same way to things, it strengthens those habits. And every time you can resist that urge to repeat the habit, simple examples like scratching an itch. Let's say before, when you never got trained, you'd be doing this all the time, and but with training, it becomes a habit, that habit of aversion, a habit of, I don't like it. Get rid of it. But with training, you can, through mindfulness, you can observe those, and you can contemplate it. Well, it's just an itch, it's not a big deal. There's no need to scratch it or rub it, or any other type of reaction. So therefore, you weaken every time you resist repeating the habit, kind of weaken the sankhara. So those four aggregates: material vibration, the feeling, the perception, and the volition, they're all focused on that object. And they'll have that object as and they arise together, basically. Like with this. All of those aggregates arose and vanished in that, fraction of a second. Or just like any things that you're feeling in the body. Like this morning in your meditation, how many of you could have some moments of seeing how quickly certain things arose and vanished in your body? Some sensations or sounds. So all those aggregates come together in one moment and vanish. But because they continue to arise and vanish many times over again, then you react to it. Now, the fifth aggregate is consciousness. And consciousness, basically, until one is an arahant, consciousness, I like to call it ego consciousness, because it's a sense of self that arises with the hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, touching, and thinking. So consciousness is the knowing faculty. But for anybody who's not an arahant, that usually entails the sense of self arises with that ego. And we already talked about that with the baby. The baby didn't have a developed ego when it was born. It still had consciousness at that time, but then very quickly it morphed into ego consciousness. And then it stays with that person their whole life, the sense of I, me, and mine. But the consciousness basically is, the knowing faculty. I mean, without consciousness, you're basically dead. So, I mean, that's what death is. Consciousness leaves the body, either due to old age or accidents. And, so we lose the awareness of the world. So these five aggregates, I'm getting to the important part of it. They arise and vanish. They come together and rise and vanish like that, similar to a reel of film. So the old style movies were made up of a roll of film. those rolls of film were made up of hundreds or thousands of still frames, there's negatives. And then it's put into a projector with little gears. And there's a space between each of those frames of the movie roll. And when it's run through the projector quite fast, and a light shown on it, we don't see the spaces in between the frames because it's moving too fast. And it seems like it's a continuous flowing scene. And then we get absorbed in it, we're rooting for our favorite cricket team, whatever. And so the illusion of things is being real is created by that process of the process of impermanence. We don't see the impermanence, so we take things to be solid and flowing real objects. So in the practice of developing practice of impermanence, we tune into just the coming and going of those of each moment of hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, touching, and thinking. Those are called mind moments, or chitta kalapa, a mind moment. It was just a moment of hearing arise and vanish, but then maybe just to recognize my voice, it probably takes about hundreds of those chitta kalapas, mind moments, for you to finally identify, oh, that's Bhante talking. And it happens very fast. So this process of the mind and consciousness is said to occur faster than a supercomputer processes information. The brain is processing these information of these five aggregates and giving us memory and creating all the brain connections and so on to identify and remember and then react. And all that is basically occurring, within the brain. So that's what is called momentary birth and death. So coming back to this idea of birth and death. There's birth and death of the lifetime. That means the baby's born, it lives a number of years. And even with that, some people live out the whole lifespan. Some people that are born, they live out the whole lifespan. Like my mother, she lived to be 102. And she never suffered any serious diseases or any other kind of things her whole life. But other people, suffer so many other things. And then people die even younger. But anyway, so there's some people live out the whole lifespan. Other people, they don't reach the end of the natural lifespan. I say, what are they saying the natural lifespan is now for humans? It's about 80, 75, between 75 and 80 is the average lifespan. Because now so many more people are living into their 90s and hundreds. But so many other people are dying younger than that. So a lot of that is due to the karmic intervention of why you would get a disease or get murdered or killed in 9/11 or so many other complicated various reasons why people die. Now, I want to give an example of clinging to these aggregates. And again, it's a personal experience about how I clung to the idea and, hated certain things when I was young or didn't like it. It caused me a lot of suffering. So when I was young, I lived in Southern California in the heart of where they grow avocados. And for some reason, I didn't like avocados. I kind of hated them. But my mother used to serve avocados with salad 2 or 3 times a week, in the season. And we could actually go out and pick avocados off the ground because they're all over the orchards and so on. So the fact that my mother said, we're having avocados for dinner tonight, a chill would go up my spine, like that. Unpleasant sensation. Then I started worrying, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Yeah. And fortunately, we had a cat. The cat, for some reason, liked avocados. So the cat used to live outside, go inside and outside. So when she told me we were having avocados for dinner, I was like, oh, I'll get the cat. I went outside and brought the cat inside. And then when the mother brought the avocados to the table and on the plate, and I saw them, another shiver went up the spine. And then when I had to bring it to my nose and smell it, sometimes I would almost gag from the smell. And then from actually putting it in the mouth and tasting it, 1 or 2 times I actually did vomit, but didn't get to that point all the time. But I suffered. So I suffered 5 ways because I thought avocados were evil. But my mother, my brother, my father, they loved avocados. They were just woofing them down. And I'd be staring at my plate. Then when they weren't looking, I would feed some to the cat under the table. And then when we finished dinner, this was back in the 50s and 60s, when people had only had one TV in their house. Usually it was in one special room called the den. And there was a black and white TV. And there was only about 4 or 5 channels back then. But anyway, so after dinner, family would go watch TV. But I had to sit there and finish my dinner. So I was missing my TV program. But then I fed the rest of the avocados to the cat under the table. And then I took my plate to the den. I said, Mom, I finished. And she said, good little boy. So what did I do? What did I do? What did I do there? I told a lie to my mother. So that's the point. Clinging to these ideas that something is evil and we don't like it leads us to breaking precepts, skillful things. Now, that's not the end of the story. So later on, when I got to India, this was many years later, I started meditating and studying the Buddhist teachings. You're hearing about how the mind creates all this suffering because of its attachments and wrong views and so on. I said, I'm gonna test this Dhamma, see if I can change my mind about avocados. So I got myself a bag of avocados, and first of all, I had to mix it with some other food and hold my nose. First couple of times I had some, reaction, but I kept on telling myself, avocados are good, avocados are good. It's all illusion, it's all in your mind. And so I was, developing this train of thought as I was eating them. And then over a period of about a week or so, gradually I could, take my hand off my nose. And little by little, I could stop mixing it with other food. And after some time, I could start eating it by itself. I didn't necessarily like it, but now at least I wasn't having these kind of violent reactions to it. And then over time, I began to like them. Because the yoga teacher, I was living in a yoga ashram then, the yoga teacher was extolling the virtues of avocado, just like they're doing today, right? But this was like 50 years ago, 60 years ago. Almost. Anyway, so yeah, that was a good experience, learning experience, and I could change my mind and turn what was causing me a lot of suffering into what at least reduced the suffering, or doesn't necessarily bring happiness, but I enjoy avocados now. So everywhere I go, people are bringing me avocados because they've heard this story in different places and so on. But so if you can change your mind about avocados, you can probably change your mind about a lot of other things too that cause suffering. So this is how we use the Dhamma. Now, that's the whole purpose of the Dhamma, is to change the way we think and our opinions about things, which are largely just due to, just conditioning. Now, I don't know why I had that reaction. Maybe I choked and died on avocado seed in a past life or something. I don't know. I didn't like them, but so the whole practice of Dhamma is about learning how to stop, clinging and believing in all of our views and opinions about things that have just caused us, not only us, but the whole world, so many problems by clinging to these aggregates. So coming back to this, so I'm feeling an unpleasant sensation of a dry mouth, so to overcome that, taking a sip of water. So coming back to the mental process. So I mentioned before about turning on the video camera of the awareness, because basically that's what our mind is. It's like a video camera with these moments of hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, touching, and thinking that are constantly coming through. Each one of those is an individual frame where the mind goes in and gets the memory of that vibration and says that's this or that's that, and it has the memory of liking or disliking in the past, so it triggers off a similar reaction. And basically it's, doing that just like, the roll of film. But because our mind is dull, our mind is very dull and is very slow, and it clings on to things. So we don't see that impermanence. And also, another important thing to understand is the relationship between the ego and desire. Now, the sense of self, what you call ego consciousness, is basically just made up of desire and aversion, and connected to the past and the future, as I already mentioned, and that started, at the time of the baby. So there's a little saying: there's no ego without desire, and no desire without the and the ego, and like two sides of a coin. And it's our ego that's, identified with these aggregates. And that's why every time you feel an experience thing, the sense of I is there. But in meditation, when you develop mindfulness, and you start just paying attention to the flow of impermanence, and just without clinging to any particular one, just feel something. See, normally if we feel something, the mind immediately, oh, that's pain in my knees, and you start focusing on it, and then we don't notice other things that are going on. But when you're not reacting to things, when you have developed that concentration that I mentioned, then the mind doesn't pay attention longer to any particular thing, and then it feels something else. So the mind can only fully identify one thing at a time. So if you're being aware of many things going on pretty much simultaneously, mind doesn't have time to cling to any particular one and to bring back the past and the future memory of that object. And when you're able to keep that up, the sense of self starts to dissolve because it has nothing to stand on. The sense of ourself is only there due to our memory. We remember when we were a child and, all through growing up and everything that we like and dislike. And so that was what keeps creating this sense of ego, I consciousness. But when you interfere with that through developing mindfulness and concentration and not giving the mind time to rest on any one object, then that sense of self gets weaker and starts to fade away. And that's how you can get a glimpse or an understanding about the meaning of no self. How the ego is basically kind of an illusion. So anyway, it's this process of, birth and death of these five aggregates that we call life. And I want to talk also about the term of about there's different forms of birth and death. We already mentioned that. The body dies, body's born, then it dies. Now, in the teachings of the Dhamma, when we die, if the mind still has, greed, hatred, and delusion, if it still has all these habits, and the ego, then that's a very powerful energy. I mean, his mind's a very powerful thing. Look at the mind of just one or two people, like our current people. I don't want to name names, but I think current politicians, presidents of countries. What they're causing chaos in the whole world. Just two or three different leaders of countries who can change the fate of the whole world. And it's going on in their mind. I mean, there's a lot of power. So you think that if those people just suddenly died, all that power that went into the mind just goes poof into nothing. That doesn't make sense. So anyway, at the time of death, that energy leaves the body and is attracted to a place that will sort of match up with the sum total of its accumulated memories and karmic impressions, or the ones that stand out the most, what grab your mind. At the time of death, because you're losing contact with the world around you, then the whole unconscious mind rises up. And the strongest images from that life or even from before may come up, and the mind would grasp at that with either fear, worry, or happiness, joy, and so on. But anyway, that kind of object then, like a magnetic force, pulls the mind, that consciousness, it's called relinking consciousness, to another body, according to the karma. So if you have a karma to be reborn as a human being, then you'll be attracted to a human body, as I mentioned, at the time of conception, this consciousness coming from another source, whether it's coming from, that kind of source. So that's why it's important to have control over one's thoughts, at the time of death. But because the time of death is unknown, it could happen at any time, we don't have the leisure of saying, well, I'll wait until I retire to meditate, or for other times until my children have graduated from college, and then I'll go and meditate or something, because that may or may not come about. So, and then a whole process again starts, the process of the baby's born, those aggregates come together again. It's sankharas, and that process continues. So there's a saying that this mind has been going through the rounds of rebirth. So that process of the mind going from lifetime to lifetime is called, in English, we call it rebirth. So the rounds of rebirth, but in the Buddhist teaching, it's called samsara, or perpetual wandering. And it means that consciousness that wanders from lifetime to lifetime according to its karma, and experiencing the results of its karma and creating new karma in that lifetime. So we are all born with karma from the past, but then we go on creating new karma in this lifetime. And so we have the momentum of karma we brought with us from the past, and then we're accumulating more and more and fresh karma even in this lifetime. And then when you die again, then the mind is attracted to another realm in order to work out that energy, that powerful energy. I think how many people have studied physics? Isn't there a saying in physics that energy is not destroyed? It just morphs into other thing. Well, that's an example. But coming back to the meditation. So in the meditation, like today and this morning, how many people could, get a sense of a lot of things that's coming and going through their mind, and had at least enough detachment where you were relaxed and could just observe them coming and going without reacting. So, yeah, that is the way that vipassana, you all heard the term vipassana, right? Vipassana. So it means seeing reality as it is. It's made up of two terms, passana, which means to see, and the prefix V, meaning to divide things up into their parts. See, so normally we don't see the five aggregates. We just see so and so, or just objects, and we don't know nothing about the mental process that's going on underneath that. So Vipassana is learning how to see these aggregates kind of separately. Not that you actually see them separately, but you understand, you can feel that each one has a different function. Material vibration, and the feeling of that vibration, then the recognition of that vibration, which is the recreated mental pictures. Because how many people, hearing actually is one of the best senses for understanding that connection between vibration and perception. Because you're sitting quiet. And then all of a sudden these sounds start coming. Now, if you were sitting there and all of a sudden somebody next to you went, what probably the thought would come into your mind? If you're not in the second jhana. Probably you think, well, or you'd say somebody's coughing. So that's the mental picture. Your eyes are closed. There's just a sound vibration, but yet it's triggering off these ideas of things going on. Car drives down the street. So, you train to observe these pictures popping out of the mind. And that's directly seeing the mind. That's the way you directly observe the mind, is by seeing how these perceptions pop out of the mind, followed by mental thoughts about them. So perception is just sort of a mental picture. It appears in kind of a separate object. But then we think about it. Thinking means, bringing in your likes and dislikes and thinking how you're going to get that object or not, and fears and worries and emotions and so on are part of the sankharas. And so you can see that process like very quickly, just of feeling, perception, and volition. And to observe that process is really the process of vipassana.
The mechanism. Is this okay?
What?
Mechanism.
Mechanism?
Yeah. The process, mechanism process.
Mechanical process.
Mechanism. MECHANISM.
Yeah, it's a mechanism. It's sort of like a mechanical process, basically. It's really like a robot. Yeah. Now that they're doing AI with robots, right? I saw something on the internet, they're now kung fu, robots are practicing kung fu on this. So you think they're real, right? But it's just a mechanical process. And so for all intents and purposes, the average person is no better off than a robot, because they don't really have control over their actions. They're just repeating these neural pathway circuits based on that feeling, perception, and volition. And that's the kind of the Vipassana understanding. And the purpose of that is to see how, we're sort of trapped in that. But just as they can train robots to do different things by changing the wires, we can change the wires in our brain. Because the brain just operates out of neural pathways and so on. So actually in Vipassana, in concentration, developing mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom, you can flip the switch in the brain. Anybody who studied neuroscience or anything about the brain, it has a bunch of switches in it, synapses and things like that, neural pathways. So when you hear a sound, like to do an itch, that was just the energy flowing in a neural pathway. But with mindfulness, if you can see that urge before you lifted the arm up, if you can see that urge, urging, I don't really need to scratch that itch right now. And so you don't lift your arm. So you're flipping the switch. The wisdom, the understanding is like flipping the switch so the energy doesn't go into that negative habit and it goes into a new habit of wisdom, of restraint. So that's how it's called neuroplasticity. They're talking now a lot about neuroplasticity and changing your brain. The Buddha was a champion of it. They don't give him any credit, though. So, but anyway, so that process of the vipassana is really tuning in, and it begins with opening up to the flow of impermanence, and then based on seeing how quickly things just arise and pass away, you also understand conditioning or the dukkha, and that we really everything is changing, that we don't really have control over it, and so what we really want are the pleasurable feelings, but they don't last, and so they become a source of our suffering by clinging to it. So just as I reflected on that, on my suffering from avocados, and that's what motivated me to spend a lot of time and effort to overcome it. So, and by doing that, you develop wisdom. So wisdom is the third, or one of the advanced stages of meditation. Meditation goes in 3 stages. There's mindfulness, there's concentration, and then wisdom. Mindfulness is the beginning stage. Concentration is the intermediate stage, and wisdom is the advanced stage. In terms of the effects that it has on our consciousness. But again, wisdom usually arises when mindfulness and concentration have become kind of balanced into a certain strength. That means the mind has become clear, that you can clearly see. Now, there's an example of this with a glass of water. Let's say you never saw clear water. People in certain parts of the world, they have to drink water from muddy streams or other places, or even in this country, sometimes you turn on the tap and the rusty color and the water is not clear. But anyway, so you scoop up some water from the gutter and you put it on a table. And then you see the water is brown or greenish color. And there's little things floating around in it. But you put it on the table, and without jerking the table, little by little, those impediments in the water sink to the bottom. And then the water becomes clear. Then you realize, oh my gosh, water wasn't brown. It's clear. That's exactly that's wisdom. And that's what happens in meditation. When the mind becomes calm and clear, you realize this mind was full of greed and hatred and all that, that's not the real mind, and so you see how you've been fooled. And that's what, stimulates the energy to try to become, free from that, or at least from the parts of it that, causes most of our anxiety and stress. So anyway, I'm going to stop here because I don't want to move too long. And we still want to have time for our meditation. So, but I just wanted to add that additional notes about the opening up to the flow of impermanence, and to pay attention to that idea where feeling transitions to perception or vibration. So everything we experience is just a vibration. Sound vibration, visible vibration, even a thought is a mental vibration. But once we identify that, then we go on blowing it up and making it something that it is not, or doesn't have to be. And so to really to observe that process, that's a deeper level of developing right understanding. So especially that for feeling, perception, and volition. See the urge that arises, or the thoughts that arise based on sounds, or body sensations. You feel something, you identify, oh, it's my knee. Right? This is the evolution of suffering. Okay, you're meditating, and the sensation just floats through this awareness. But if it's strong enough, the mind grabs it and pulls that sensation down into something you call my knee. And then this knee is connected to this larger body. And this body is mine. And then the struggle arises. Because the mind doesn't like that. The eye doesn't like that. And the struggle. That's really the evolution of suffering. And sometimes you'll get insights into that, And but so anyway. Okay.
Uh,